Terminator Dark Fate, directed by Tim Miller, is the newest and sixth film in the Terminator franchise, which is now once again doing another reboot, so to speak. Ignoring the event of Terminator 3, 4, and 5, this movie picks up after Terminator 2 in a, I guess you can say, like a different timeline. It's really not a different timeline. It's supposed to be a retcon where now we have James Cameron involved as a producer, and that's supposed to get us to buy the movie or to go see it. But my job here is to tell you if you should or not. Now, for the purpose of this review, I'm not going to be going into spoilers for the film. I'm going to do a separate spoiler discussion in the future. Probably sometime on Sunday or maybe early next week, Monday, Tuesday, you will have a spoiler discussion on this channel. But I want to go into non-spoilers. However, that being said, I'm going to assume in this review that you have seen Terminator and Terminator 2. I know a lot of folks, for some reason, never saw Terminator 1, which is, I mean, you don't have to see it to watch and enjoy T2, but it is crucial to see. It's a great movie. Terminator 1 is a fantastic classic film, very different tone from Terminator 2. And I do want to plug my podcast over on the Geekdom 101 podcast. Myself and Mike from Laughingstock Media did a full retrospective on all the previous 5 Terminator films, so check that out. But now we're picking up here with Tim Miller's Dark Fate. So it's interesting what they did here because they took a big twist. Actually, there's a few twists in the film, and I gotta say, some of them are going to irritate hardcore Terminator fans. If you're a Terminator fanboy and you love the lore of the future war and John Connor and the resistance against Skynet and all that stuff, there are things in this movie that are going to bother you. I'm telling you that right now if you are heavily invested in that. However, if you kind of understand the direction they're going in, we got to give them credit for one thing. What they did with this film was very, very creative and something that I never would have really thought about watching T1 and T2. It's a pretty creative direction, but is it a good direction? Well, again, when I do these reviews, I'm very honest with you guys, and I'm going to be real with you on this. Some of y'all are going to be okay with it. Some of y'all are not going to be okay with it. Now, one thing I want to kind of real quick get out of the way here, and we have to make this very clear. The main protagonists of this movie, 3 of them are women. And obviously there's Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's back, reprising his role as the Cyberdyne Systems Model 101 T-800 Terminator. And, of course, the return of Sarah Connor herself, Linda Hamilton, to the franchise. So it's good to have them back. And as far as performances go and as far as acting goes, they pretty much steal the show in this movie. The other actors are fine, but they are kind of the big centerpiece, you know, as far as performances go. To me, and I've said this before I even saw the movie, Sarah Connor here reminds me a lot of what they did with the Halloween 2018? Yeah, the one that came out last year with Jamie Lee Curtis. There's very similar things going on here. In fact, the characters are very much alike, but they steal the show. But people, I think, are going to be split on what they do with Arnold in this film, because there are certain things that they did with the Terminator, or at least with Arnold's T-800 in this movie, which I'm not going to spoil. He is in the movie. I'm not going to tell you what happens or how he becomes who he is and where he came from. That's a big spoiler. And actually, I did spoil some of it on this channel. Not everything was correct, but there was a big spoiler that I dropped earlier in the year, a few months ago, about the first segment, the first act of this film, which I actually thought was going to be longer than it was. It's actually really quick what they do with this movie. But I will say this before we go any further. The de-aging tech in this movie is absolutely absurd. I talked about it over with Gemini Man and other movies like Ant-Man did it, Rogue One did it. But Rogue One did like the whole Tarkin thing. But here they had the de-aging thing where they made Linda Hamilton look like she was, you know, in her 20s or early 30s, and it was just stunning. There's a shot of her that zooms out where you would swear they shot this thing in 1991. I couldn't believe it. It's just stunning as to what they can do with technology. But no, like I was saying, there are certain aspects of this Terminator that are a little bit weird, that are kind of hard to swallow from Terminator fans. You're going to know when you go see the movie. So to me, it's really going to come down to, what are you expecting from this film? Are you expecting great special effects? The movie does have great special effects. However, and I've said this many times before, there are scenes in this film that are obviously CGI, because everything nowadays is CGI. And the effects that were used in 91's T2 kind of mirror this movie, except those might have looked a tiny bit more realistic. There's just something about shooting a movie on film and using CGI sparingly but correctly that makes things look more real. There are scenes in this film where they actually show some scenes, I guess you can call them scenes, but they show, I guess, I don't know how to call it, but it's the future. You know, the destroyed future, the war, the future war, and it's just so obviously CGI. Like, it's different than when you watch T2 and you have that shot of the Terminator stepping on the skull and it zooms up and it looks like a real Terminator, like a real endoskeleton. You know, that looks a little wonky, but the actual movie itself, there's lots of action, tons of action in this film. The time travel, to me, did make sense to a degree. It didn't make full sense because time travel never really does, but it was not too confusing at all. In fact, they borrowed the time travel aspects of other Terminator films. You know, I've said this before I even saw the film, and I was right now that I've seen it. Terminator Dark Fate takes ideas from Terminator 3, 4, and 5 and reutilizes them in this film. So you got stuff from Salvation, you've got stuff from Genesis and Rise of the Machines, ideas and concepts that are used here. Big one is the villain of the film, known as Rev 9, played by Gabriel Luna, I think it was. So with Rev 9, he is essentially, he's supposed to be a combination of the T-800 and the T-1000, but really, he's more like an enhanced version of the TX in that not only does he have the ability to have the endoskeleton surrounded by, you know, the liquid metal tissue, but he also has the ability to actually now split his body into two different sort of entities that are linked by, I guess, Wi-Fi or whatever. You know, the liquid metal side and the endoskeleton, but the endoskeleton is extremely durable. Like, this is not like an endoskeleton that is just going to get squashed by a hydraulic press like the one in the first Terminator film. Like, this guy can take some punishment. And it reminds me a lot of TX. Plus, you can actually hook up to the networks of the world and connect to them and, you know, gain data from the network of the internet. Now, this film does address that we live in a world where, you know, there's cameras everywhere. And of course, if you're going to send back a time-traveling, you know, psychotic, or not psychotic, but a time-traveling killing machine, it's not really psychotic. It doesn't have a consciousness to be psychotic, but you know what I'm saying. If you're going to do that, then obviously having knowledge of the tech that we have would help. And doing this, you know, it incorporates tech really well because early in the film, Sarah Connor talks about how we live in a world where there's cameras and there's, you know, audio recordings. Everybody's pretty much kind of being followed everywhere with the way the world is now. And that is addressed in the film, and the Terminator does utilize that to its advantage. The new main character in this film, obviously Mackenzie Davis plays Grace. I thought she was a bit wooden in the film. She is the good soldier sent back in time, and it is something a little bit different with her in this film. They actually do something sort of like what they did with Marcus, but the reverse. Don't want to go into too many spoilers on that, but Danny is played by Natalia Reyes, who she does a decent job. She's not that interesting, but she really does pick it up later in the movie, I think, and I actually feel like she becomes a pretty cool character by the end. One more thing I want to talk about real quick, and I got to get this out of the way. Like I said, there are 3 female main characters, right? I said that earlier in the review. I didn't finish my point. You are going to hear YouTube channels talk about how this is an SJW propaganda film. It's pro-feminist. And if you hear them say that, I'm telling you right now, and you know how I stand on this type of shit. They have really, really small dicks. I mean, any channel, if you hear a review from anyone, and I haven't seen a single YouTube review of this film. Not a single one. So I'm not taking shots at anybody. I haven't seen a single one. You have my word on that. If any YouTube channel tries to say this is an SJW movie, they have a tiny penis. I'm telling you that right now because there's so much action with Arnold. Arnold does a lot more than I thought he was going to do in this movie. I was expecting a cameo. No, he actually becomes an integral part of the big finale, the big fight with the Rev 9 Terminator. He does a lot. The women all work together. Nothing in this film is anti-men or, you know, oh, I am woman, hear me roar. None of that is in this movie. Like, yes, the resistance, you know, there's female leaders and there's very important women, but that's how it is in the real world anyways. And if you don't see that, you're you're really stuck in a different decade, brother, because this movie is totally not, I assure you, not SJW propaganda whatsoever. It's not. And anybody who tells you otherwise is feeding you a line of crap. Trust me on this one. Again, nothing in the movie disrespects men. If anything, if you want to really dig deep and make a fool of yourself, you could even point to the line in Terminator 2 when Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor's talking about how men built the hydrogen bomb and all they care about is destruction. Like, even that had more of like an anti-man flavor to it than this did. And of course, that was absolutely not anti-man flavored. It was James Cameron making a point about how humanity is too sick to survive. Which is kind of the same point that this movie makes, is that even if we try to do things right, we're always going to screw up and make it worse for the rest of us. And there's several scenes in this movie that make that point clear. Male or female. You know, it's a union. It's the humans against the machines. That's the war we're fighting in this film, not men versus women. So again, if anybody tries to tell you otherwise, just ignore them or unsubscribe to them. I'm telling you that because I'm not going to BS you. But again, lots of action in this film, some interesting twists and turns here and there that I wasn't expecting, and there's some things I really did not like. For example, there's just weird... What happens to Arnold is weird, like I said before. There's also a big action sequence on an airplane that I thought went too far. There was just too much stuff going on, too hard to follow. They go from an airplane to underwater in a matter of minutes, and it's just too much. And it's also dark, and CGI doesn't look that good. It just, that sequence I thought went over the top in my opinion, and was actually, could have been shortened up a little bit. They were trying to have that mentality of bigger is better, and that's not always the case. That is not always the case. So I thought the movie was, again, it's the best non-T1, T2 movie. Now, Salvation also, I would put this probably slightly above Salvation, slightly above it, but it's tough because Christian Bale was awesome in that movie and the concepts in that movie are great, but I put this a little tiny bit higher than that, but it's nowhere close to the emotion and the drama of the first two films. You're not going to top them. You're just not. Like, they're just James Cameron at his best in the first two Terminator films, and I'm a hardcore Terminator fan, I'm telling you that, but it definitely was... it was an okay movie. It was an okay movie. I had fun with it. It's not one I'm going to go watch over and over again. It didn't have goofy time travel nonsense that made no sense like Genesis did. But it was fun. I had a good time, but not the best. So if you're asking for a recommendation, you've heard my review now. It's been over 12 minutes. If you're a Terminator fan, go see the movie. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. Well, actually, wait. Hold off until my spoiler review, because we're going to talk about it more there. But if you're a Terminator fan, you're probably going to go see it anyways. If you're not a Terminator fan, go watch the first two, and then maybe think about seeing this, but don't expect it to be anywhere close to as good, because it's not. It's just not as good. Thank you. Thank you so much, and let me know in the comments what you thought about the movie. If you're avoiding spoilers, of course, avoid the comment section, because who knows what they're going to say. But cause there's a couple of really big spoilers in the very first, 5 minutes of the movie. Huge spoilers in the first 5 minutes. Yeah, we'll talk about it more next week. I'll talk to you soon.